A routine traffic stop on a desolate highway turns into a nightmare when a power-hungry officer targets the wrong couple. He thought he was untouchable, flexing his authority to terrorize 2 civilians. He had absolutely no idea he just pulled over the federal agents sent to dismantle his entire department. The oppressive July heat baked the asphalt of Highway 119, a 2-lane stretch of road that served as the primary artery into the township of Oak Haven. It was a quiet, unassuming town, nestled deep in the rural heartland, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and the local police department operated like a privately funded militia. For years, complaints had been quietly filed and subsequently buried regarding the Oak Haven Police Department. Allegations of severe racial profiling, illegal asset forfeiture, and egregious civil rights violations had finally reached the threshold required for federal intervention. Inside the air-conditioned cabin of a slate-gray 2024 Chevrolet Tahoe Supervisory Special Agent Derek Reynolds adjusted his grip on the steering wheel. Beside him sat senior investigator Naomi Brooks, a veteran of the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. They weren't wearing their tactical gear or their badges on their chests. Derek was dressed in a casual linen button-down and khakis, while Naomi wore a simple summer dress. To anyone looking through the tinted windows, they were just a successful black couple passing through on a weekend road trip. That was exactly what they wanted the local authorities to think. "We are entering the enforcement zone," Naomi said quietly, her eyes scanning the tree line. She tapped the screen of the modified tablet, resting on her lap, which was silently pulling dispatch data from the local county network. "Reports indicate this exact 3-mile stretch accounts for 80% of Oak Haven's out-of-state traffic citations and 95% of their vehicle searches." Derek checked his rear-view mirror. "Let's see if their reputation holds up. Speed is locked at exactly 54 in a 55 zone. Both hands on the wheel. Turn signals used for every lane drift." 2 miles ahead, parked strategically behind a cluster of dense billboards, sat Patrol Unit 42. Inside the cruiser was Officer Greg Mitchell. Mitchell was a 12-year veteran of the force, a man whose thick neck and tight buzz cut were as much a part of his uniform as the badge pinned to his chest. Mitchell was the department's top earner. He had a sixth sense for pulling over the right vehicles' cars that could be seized, drivers who didn't know their rights, or people who were too scared to contest a ticket in a rural county courthouse. As the gray Tahoe cruised past the billboard, Mitchell's radar gun clocked it at 54 miles per hour. A legal, perfectly safe speed. But Mitchell didn't care about the speed. His eyes locked onto the driver. Through the slightly rolled-down window, he caught a glimpse of Derek. "Well, well," Mitchell muttered to himself, a cruel smirk stretching across his face. He grabbed his radio. "Dispatch Unit 42. I've got a suspicious vehicle heading southbound on 119. Slate Chevy Tahoe. Looks like a rental out of state. I'm going to initiate a rolling surveillance." Mitchell threw the cruiser into drive, kicking up a cloud of gravel as he pulled onto the highway. Inside the Tahoe, Naomi glanced at the side mirror. "Company." She noted her voice, devoid of panic. "Oak Haven PD cruiser approaching fast from the rear. He's tailgating." "I see him," Derek replied smoothly, maintaining his exact speed. "Start the hidden recorders, front, rear, and cabin audio." Naomi reached into her designer handbag, casually pressing a sequence of buttons on a concealed digital recording device. A tiny green light blinked to life. Simultaneously, the dash cam, which looked like a standard GPS mount, began uploading encrypted live-streamed video directly to a secure server at the FBI field office 200 miles away. Mitchell rode the Tahoe's bumper for nearly 2 miles, aggressively swerving left and right to look into the side mirrors, trying to intimidate the driver into making a mistake. He was waiting for a tire to touch the yellow line, a sudden brake check, anything to justify the stop. But Derek drove with the mechanical precision of a man who had spent hours on tactical driving courses. Frustrated by the flawless driving, Mitchell decided he didn't need an excuse. He flicked the switch on his center console. The light bar erupted in a blinding flash of red and blue, and a short, aggressive burst of the siren pierced the quiet afternoon air. "Showtime," Derek whispered. He calmly activated his right turn signal and smoothly pulled the heavy SUV onto the gravel shoulder, placing the vehicle in park. He rolled down all four windows, a standard safety protocol, and placed both hands at the 10 and 2 position on the steering wheel. Naomi placed her hands flat on her lap. In the rearview mirror, they watched Officer Mitchell step out of his cruiser. He didn't approach immediately. Instead, he unclipped the retention strap on his holster, resting his right hand heavily on the grip of his service weapon. He adopted a wide, swaggering stance, taking his time as he walked toward the Tahoe, deliberately dragging his knuckles along the tail light of the vehicle to leave a smudge, a classic intimidation tactic. "Notice the hand on the weapon?" Naomi murmured, keeping her lips barely moving. "No provocation, no erratic driving, yet he's approaching with lethal force readiness." "Document it all," Derek replied softly. "Let him dig the hole." Officer Mitchell stopped just behind the driver's side B-pillar, forcing Derek to turn his head awkwardly over his left shoulder to make eye contact. It was another calculated psychological maneuver designed to put the driver in a physically subordinate position. "License, registration, and the rental agreement," Mitchell barked. "No, good afternoon. No, do you know why I pulled you over?" Just a harsh, demanding bark. "Good afternoon, officer," Derek said, his tone polite and even. "My license is in my wallet in my back right pocket. The rental agreement is in the glove compartment. How would you like me to proceed?" Mitchell sneered, leaning closer to the window, his mirrored sunglasses reflecting Derek's calm expression. "I didn't ask for a conversation, boy. I told you to hand over your papers. Move slow." Naomi's jaw tightened imperceptibly at the use of the word boy, a blatant, racially charged degradation aimed at a grown man. She made a mental note. That single word would be a cornerstone in the civil rights violation report. Moving with deliberate slowness, Derek retrieved his wallet, extracted his driver's license, a perfectly legitimate cover ID, listing his name as Derek Reynolds Civilian, and handed it out the window. Naomi reached into the glove box and produced the rental paperwork, passing it to Derek, who handed it to the officer. Mitchell snatched the documents. He studied the license, then looked at Derek, then at Naomi. "Where are you people coming from?" "Just passing through on our way down south," Derek answered neutrally. "Passing through?" Mitchell mocked, tapping the plastic license against his chin. "You seem mighty calm for someone who was swerving all over the road back there." "With respect, officer, I had my cruise control set to 54, and I maintained my lane the entire time," Derek replied. "Are you calling me a liar?" Mitchell's voice dropped an octave, the hostility instantly spiking. He leaned his head fully into the window, aggressively invading Derek's space. "Because in this town, I am the law. And if I say you were swerving, you were swerving. Now whose car is this really? You hauling something in the back? Drugs, cash?" "It's a standard rental from the airport, officer. We are just on a trip." Naomi interjected, her voice smooth but firm. Mitchell snapped his head toward her, his face turning a mottled red. "Did I speak to you? Keep your mouth shut unless spoken to. You understand me." "Officer, there is no need for hostility," Derek said, his voice dropping its submissive tone just a fraction, revealing a hint of the hardened agent beneath the surface. "We are cooperating fully." "Oh, you're gonna cooperate, all right," Mitchell snarled. He stepped back and keyed his shoulder mic. "Dispatch, I need a secondary unit out here on 10 to 19 mile marker 4. Suspects are being combative. Bring the K9. Combative. The word hung in the air. It was the magic word corrupt officers use to justify physical force. Less than 2 minutes later, a second patrol car came tearing down the highway sirens, wailing, and slammed to a halt in front of the Tahoe, boxing them in. Out stepped a younger officer, Evan Hayes. Hayes looked to be in his mid-20s, a rookie who clearly idolized the older, dominant Mitchell. "What do we got, Greg?" Hayes asked, jogging over his hand, also resting on his gun belt. "Couple of smart mouths," Mitchell lied smoothly. "Driver's acting erratic. I smell marijuana coming from the cabin." Inside the car, Naomi let out a soft, almost imperceptible sigh. The phantom smell of marijuana, the oldest, most tired excuse in the book, used to bypass the Fourth Amendment and manufacture probable cause for an illegal search. "Officer, neither of us smokes, and there is absolutely nothing illegal in this vehicle," Derek stated loudly and clearly, ensuring the hidden microphones picked up every syllable. "I do not consent to any searches of this vehicle or our persons." Mitchell laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "You think I care about your consent? Step out of the car. Now." "I am requesting a supervisor be present," Derek said, remaining in his seat, his hands still gripping the steering wheel. "I am the supervisor out here," Mitchell roared. He ripped the driver's side door open with violent force. "Get out of the car before I drag you out." Rookie Officer Hayes shifted uncomfortably, looking around the empty highway. "Hey, Greg, maybe we should just write the warning and—" "Shut up, Evan!" Mitchell barked. He turned his attention back to Derek, unholstering his taser and pressing the yellow plastic directly against Derek's ribcage. "Last warning, boy. Step out or you're gonna ride the lightning." Knowing that resisting a drawn weapon, even a less lethal one, would compromise the undercover protocol and potentially put Naomi in the crossfire, Derek unbuckled his seatbelt. "I am stepping out of the vehicle under duress," Derek announced clearly for the recording. He stepped out onto the hot gravel. Despite Mitchell's aggressive posturing, Derek towered over the officer by a good 3 inches, his broad shoulders and athletic build briefly giving Mitchell pause. But the badge on Mitchell's chest gave him a false sense of invincibility. "Turn around, hands on the roof, spread 'em," Mitchell ordered, shoving Derek hard between the shoulder blades. Derek complied, placing his hands flat on the hot metal roof of the Tahoe. Mitchell stepped up behind him and began a violently invasive pat-down, kicking Derek's legs further apart. "Watch her, Evan," Mitchell ordered the rookie. Hayes walked around to the passenger side, looking through the glass at Naomi, who sat perfectly still, recording his face, with the lens hidden in her handbag. "You guys have a lot of cash in this car?" Mitchell asked, his hands aggressively searching Derek's pockets. "Because if we find undeclared cash, the county seizes it. You know that, right?" "There is no cash, just our personal belongings," Derek said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "We'll see about that," Mitchell said. He pulled Derek's arms behind his back with unnecessary force. "I'm detaining you for officer safety while we search this vehicle." The sharp metallic click of handcuffs echoed in the heavy summer air. The cold steel locked tightly around Derek's wrists, biting into his skin. Inside the car, Naomi watched the scene unfold. She had seen enough. Mitchell had committed unlawful detainment assault under color of authority, and was actively attempting an illegal search and seizure. They had everything they needed on camera. The trap had been sprung, and the rat was firmly caught in the jaws. Naomi slowly reached into her handbag. She bypassed the recording device and wrapped her fingers around the cool leather of her federal credentials. Outside, Mitchell smiled triumphantly, thinking he had just secured another easy payday. "All right, Hayes," Mitchell yelled over the roof of the SUV. "Pull the female out. Let's tear this car apart and see what these two are hiding." Derek, standing with his hands cuffed behind his back, slowly turned his head to look over his shoulder at Officer Mitchell. The submissive cooperative demeanor vanished instantly, replaced by the cold authoritative stare of a federal agent who had taken down cartels. "Officer Mitchell," Derek said, his voice slicing through the thick air like a blade. "You have just made the worst mistake of your life." Officer Greg Mitchell threw his head back and let out a harsh, barking laugh that echoed across the empty expanse of Highway 119. The sound was abrasive, scraping against the suffocating July humidity like sandpaper. He tightened his grip on Derek's handcuffs, deliberately twisting the metal chain to inflict a sharp, agonizing burst of pain on the agent's wrists. "The worst mistake of my life." Mitchell sneered, his hot, coffee-stained breath washing over the back of Derek's neck. "Boy, you watch way too many television shows. You think because you're wearing a nice shirt and driving a shiny new rental that you've got some kind of power out here. Out here I am God. I am the judge, the jury, and the executioner of this asphalt. You're just another blip on my radar. Another asset forfeiture waiting to be processed into the county budget." On the passenger side of the vehicle, Rookie Officer Evan Hayes tentatively grasped the handle of the Tahoe's heavy door. He was sweating profusely, the dark rings under the armpits of his polyester uniform expanding by the second. Something about this entire situation felt profoundly wrong to him. The driver was too calm. The woman in the passenger seat was too quiet. There was no panic, no fumbling, no frantic apologies, none of the usual behaviors exhibited by the civilians Mitchell regularly terrorized. "Ma'am," Hayes stammered, his voice cracking slightly as he pulled the door open. "I need you to step out of the vehicle. Keep your hands where I can see them." Naomi Brooks did not immediately move. Instead, she slowly pivoted her torso to face the young officer. Her expression was utterly devoid of fear. It was a look of cold, calculating clinical assessment. She looked at Hayes not as an authority figure, but as a biologist might look at a peculiar insect under a microscope. "Officer Hayes, is it?" Naomi asked, her voice projecting clearly over the rumble of the idling police cruisers. She did not raise her hands. Instead, she reached calmly into the open designer handbag sitting on her lap. "Hey, hands where I can see them!" Hayes shouted, stepping back and instinctively dropping his right hand to the grip of his sidearm. His heart hammered furiously against his ribs. "Do not draw that weapon, Evan," Naomi commanded. The sheer overwhelming authority in her voice caused the young rookie to freeze entirely. It wasn't a request. It was an absolute, indisputable order from someone entirely accustomed to being obeyed. Slowly, deliberately, Naomi pulled a sleek navy blue leather folio from her bag. She didn't hand it to Hayes. Instead, with a sharp flick of her wrist, she flipped it open and held it up to the harsh afternoon sunlight. Embedded in the rich leather was a heavy, gleaming gold shield. Above the shield, an uncompromising federal ID card was prominently displayed, bearing her photograph and the seal of the United States Department of Justice. "I am Senior Investigator Naomi Brooks with the United States Department of Justice Civil Rights Division." She announced her words, clipping through the stifling air with the precision of a metronome. operating under the direct authorization of Assistant Attorney General Kristen Clark. The man your partner is currently illegally assaulting is Supervisory Special Agent Derek Reynolds of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Hayes stumbled backward as if he had been physically struck in the chest. All the blood instantly drained from his face, leaving him a ghastly shade of pale gray. He looked from the gold badge in Naomi's hand to the towering handcuffed man standing by the rear bumper, and then to his commanding officer. Mitchell, hearing the commotion, snapped his head around. His mirrored sunglasses slipped slightly down the bridge of his nose, revealing eyes wide with sudden, unadulterated confusion. He stared at the federal badge gleaming in the passenger seat, but his ego, heavily fortified by a decade of unchecked rural corruption, stubbornly refused to accept the reality of the situation. "What kind of garbage is this?" Mitchell yelled, his voice laced with a desperate, venomous denial. He shoved Derek roughly against the side of the Tahoe and stomped toward the passenger door, his hand hovering dangerously close to his holstered firearm. "You think you can buy a fake badge online and scare me? I'll have you both locked up in federal prison for impersonating government officials. I'll add it to the resisting arrest and narcotics distribution charges." Naomi stepped gracefully out of the Tahoe, smoothing the front of her summer dress. She completely ignored Mitchell's aggressive posturing, treating him as though he were a minor, irritating obstacle rather than a man with a gun. "Officer Mitchell," Naomi said, her tone chillingly level, "you are currently the primary subject of a multi-agency federal investigation known as Operation Highway Ghost. We have been monitoring your communications, auditing your county forfeiture logs, and tracking your patrol patterns for 18 months. We know about the $400,000 in cash you've illegally seized from out-of-state motorists over the past 3 years. We know about the phantom marijuana odors you fabricate to bypass Fourth Amendment protections. Inspector General Michael Horowitz has already reviewed the preliminary evidence and authorized this field operation." Mitchell stopped dead in his tracks. The mention of the specific dollar, amounts, the operational name, and the Inspector General acted like a bucket of ice water thrown directly into his face. The aggressive, domineering swagger instantly evaporated, replaced by the frantic, chaotic energy of a cornered animal. "You're lying," Mitchell stammered, though his voice had lost its thunderous boom. He reached frantically for the radio clipped to his shoulder epaulette. "Dispatch, this is 42 Selusets. I have a 10-15 situation. Suspect is claiming federal credentials. I need the chief down here immediately." Derek, still facing the Tahoe with his hands cuffed tightly behind his broad back, let out a low, grim chuckle. "You can try to call Chief William Peterson if you want, Greg," Derek said, his voice resonating with an undeniable, terrifying calm. "But he's not going to answer his radio. Right now, a heavily armed FBI hostage rescue team is executing a no-knock federal warrant on his lakeside property. He's currently lying face down on his expensive mahogany deck, wearing matching steel bracelets." Hayes dropped to his knees in the gravel. The rookie was hyperventilating, his hands clasped over his head. "I didn't know," Hayes gasped, tears of pure terror welling in his eyes. "I just started 6 months ago. He told me this was how we funded the department. He told me it was standard procedure." "Stay on the ground, Evan," Naomi instructed the rookie firmly. "Your cooperation starting right now will dictate the remainder of your life." She reached into her bag one final time, pulling out a heavily encrypted satellite communications radio. She pressed the thick transmission button on the side. "Command, this is Brooks. Target has taken the bait. Unlawful detainment initiated. Assault under color of authority confirmed on camera. Move in and secure the perimeter." For exactly 10 agonizing seconds, The highway was entirely silent, save for the rhythmic, terrified gasping of Rookie Officer Evan Hayes and the low, steady hum of the Tahoe's engine. Mitchell stood frozen in the center of the asphalt, his hand still gripping his radio, his mind completely incapable of processing the catastrophic implosion of his entire reality. He had built an empire of intimidation on this desolate stretch of road, and in less than 5 minutes, 2 people had systematically dismantled it without ever raising their voices. Then the horizon violently erupted. From the north, completely bypassing the speed limit, 3 massive matte black Chevrolet Suburbans crested the hill, moving in a tight, synchronized tactical formation. Simultaneously from the south, a heavily armored Lenco Bearcat tactical vehicle roared down the highway, its reinforced steel plating absorbing the blinding July sunlight. Mitchell stumbled backward, his hands trembling violently. The flashing red and blue lights of his own patrol cruiser were instantly dwarfed by the overwhelming strobe of federal enforcement vehicles converging on his location. The Bearcat skidded to a massive shuddering halt, intentionally blocking the entire southbound lane and completely cutting off any prayer of escape. The doors of the Suburbans flew open before the vehicles even came to a complete stop. More than a dozen heavily armored federal agents poured out onto the asphalt. They were wearing olive-drab tactical gear, Kevlar vests emblazoned with bold, bright yellow letters reading FBI, and carrying short-barreled M4 carbine rifles. FBI, nobody move. Keep your hands in the air. A booming voice echoed from a mounted megaphone on the lead Suburban. Special Agent in charge, Robert Henderson, a towering, no-nonsense veteran with steel-gray hair and piercing blue eyes, stormed out of the lead vehicle. He bypassed the terrified rookie on the ground entirely and marched directly toward Greg Mitchell. Mitchell, absolutely paralyzed by fear, slowly raised his trembling hands into the air. The man who had mercilessly bullied, harassed, and robbed innocent travelers for over a decade was now weeping openly, tears streaming down his flushed, sun-beaten face. "Don't shoot," Mitchell sobbed, his voice pitching upward into a pathetic, high-pitched whine. "Please don't shoot me." "Officer Greg Mitchell," Henderson barked, stepping within inches of the corrupt cop's face. "Keep your hands exactly where they are." 2 tactical agents flanked Mitchell instantly. One agent expertly stripped the service weapon from Mitchell's duty belt, tossing it safely onto the hood of the patrol car. The other agent forcefully kicked Mitchell's legs apart, spun him around, and slammed him against the side of his own cruiser with enough force to rattle the windows. The sharp, heavy click of federal handcuffs locking around Mitchell's wrists sounded like a death knell. Meanwhile, a 3rd agent rushed over to Derek. Using a universal key, the agent quickly unlocked the department-issued handcuffs, binding the supervisory special agent. Derek rolled his massive shoulders, rubbing the deep, angry red indentations left by the tight steel, and slowly turned around to face his former captor. Mitchell